This is lecture number 3 of chapter 4, Market Forces of Supply and Demand. In the previous lecture, we talked about supply, that quantity supplied is the amount of a good that sellers are willing and able to sell. This means that supply is defined as a seller is able and willing to sell the product at particular quantity at a certain price. Now in this lecture, we will be discussing the supply curve shifters. That what are the determinants of supply curve? A supply curve can shift as well. The supply curve shows how price affects quantity supplied and all other things being equal, or you can say ceteris paribus. These other things are non-price determinants of supply. Changes in them, that is, other things, shifts the supply curve. Non-price determinants of supply means the things other than the price of a good that determines the seller's supply. And a change in a non-price determinants of supply changes the supply curve as well, and the supply curve shifts in either of the direction, either it shifts inwards or it shifts outwards. So coming towards the first supply curve shifter, that is input prices. What are input prices? The prices of input which are used to produce certain products. Examples of input prices are wages and prices of raw materials here. Let's say there is a manufacturer that requires labor, so he has to pay wages to that labor, and those wages are considered as input costs. Prices of raw materials, in the previous example of lettuce, you need milk and coffee, so all these are raw materials. A fall in input prices makes production more profitable at each output price. So firms supply larger quantity at each price and the supply curve shifts to right. Here output price means the price that the seller is charging to his customers. And the input prices are the like you can say wages and prices of raw materials. Now comes a graphical representation of a supply curve shifter, that is input price. Suppose that the price of the milk falls. At each price, the quantity of lettuce supplied will increase, and this increase is shown by 5 units. You can see here that first it is 5, then 10, 15. So a change is here is shown by 5 units. Milk is less expensive now, so Starbucks is making more money per lettuce at $1 here. When the price is $1, Starbucks used to supply 5 lettuce initially, but now they are willing to supply 10 lettuce at $1. So on and so forth. If you look at the price $6, initially Starbucks is selling 30 lattice. But now, as milk is less expensive now, so Starbucks is willing to sell 35 lattice at $6. So these graphs show a positive shift in supply curve, that is, supply curve shifts right due to fall in input prices. In this case, input price is the price of milk, and when the price of milk falls, that is, the input price falls, so supply curve shifts rightward. And you can see here the opposite could be true as well. If input prices go up, if milk became more expensive, they are making less money, then this curve could shift to left direction as well. And the Starbucks is less willing to supply lattice, and supply curve shifts left. So this is the second case when the input prices increase. Now, next supply curve shifter is technology. Technology determines how much inputs are required to produce a unit of output. Technology can make things more efficient. You can make more goods with less inputs, which cuts down your cost. A cost-saving technological improvement has the same effect as a fall in input prices. So if you are saving money through technology, your cost per unit of output, for example, if you have a new machine and it makes the lattice with less milk, that causes Starbucks to use less milk, which lowers this cost and can shift the supply curve to the right. That means that now Starbucks is willing to supply uh, more lattice at lower price due to technological advancements. So in this case, supply curve shifts to right. Now next supply curve shifter is number of sellers. An increase in number of sellers increases the quantity supplied at each price, and supply curve shifts right. This is commonly seen in competition. If there are more restaurants in a town, then there is more competition. So the restaurant owners try to compete with each other. They lower the prices, they can provide more supply, and if there is more supply, it means that you can say if something is more available through the increase of a number of sellers, the quantity supplied at each price increases, and that affects the competition. Another supply curve shifter is expectations. Here is the example that events in Middle East lead to expectations of higher oil prices. In response, owners of Texas oil fields reduce supply now, save some inventory to sell later at the higher price, so supply curve shifts left. If the price of some product is expected to rise in future, so it means that its current supply decreases because the seller stored the product and will sell that product when the prices rise in future. It means that whenever the price of a product is expected to rise in future, its current supply decreases, which causes supply curve to shift left. That means that supply curve shifts inward, showing a decrease in quantity supplied. Now comes a summary of variables that influence sellers. A change in input prices, technology, number of sellers, and expectations shifts the supply curve in either side, either to right direction or to the left direction. And a change in price of a same product causes a movement along the supply curve. The same phenomena we discussed in lecture part 1, where we discussed demand in detail. Now comes active learning 2, that is about supply curve. Now the question is, draw a supply curve for tax return preparation software. What happens to it in each of the following scenarios? Coming to the answer of part A, that is a fall in price of tax return software. Showing it graphically, we have price of tax return software on y-axis and quantity of tax return software on x-axis. If you notice, supply curve does not shift, it remains same. It just moved along the supply curve to a lower price at P2 and lower quantity at Q2. Initially it was here at this point where price is P1 and quantity is Q1. But due to a fall in price of tax return softwares, price decreases, which causes quantity to decrease as well, and supply is now at this point where the price is P2 and quantity is Q2. Now let's suppose here that you are a supplier of tax return software. Originally you are selling the software at price P1 and you are selling quantity, that is Q1. If the prices go down as a seller, you are making less money now, so you are less willing to supply more of the product. So you shift from Q1 to Q2, showing a decrease in quantity sold when price decreases from P1 to P2. So here it shows the movement along the supply curve. Now answer of part B, that is fall in cost of producing software. Notice that this is not a fall in price, it's a fall in cost of producing softwares, which causes supply curve to shift. As it is a fall in cost of producing software, means that you are making more money per unit of software, because here your cost decreases, so the supply curve shifts to right. And at each price level, the quantity supplied also increases from Q1 to Q2. Due to fall in cost of producing software, supply curve shifts right from S1 to S2, and quantity supply increases from Q1 to Q2 at same price level, that is P1. Here price of the product is not changing, but here the input price, or you can say that the cost of producing software decreases here. So shift, this causes supply curve to shift in right direction from S1 to S2, and quantity also increases from Q1 to Q2. Now next is supply and demand together. Now we are going to put supply and demand curve together in one diagram, and we would like to determine the equilibrium in the market. Here equilibrium refers to a situation in which the price has reached the level where quantity supplied and quantity demanded becomes equal. Here, let's say we are taking the same example, that is lattice. So here in latte market, this is the demand curve and this is the supply curve, and the equilibrium is at $3. So this is the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity is 15. So there are two things that are in equilibrium. One is equilibrium price and the other is equilibrium quantity. Now comes equilibrium price. Equilibrium price is the price that balances quantity supplied and quantity demanded. On a graph, it is the price at which the supply and demand curves intersect each other. So this is the point where demand and supply curve intersects, and here the price is $3. Here at price of $3, the amount of quantity supplied and quantity demanded is equal, that is 15 units. That means buyers are willing to purchase 15 units of a product, let's say 15 lattice, and suppliers are also willing to sell 15 lattice at the price that is $3. So $3 is the equilibrium price that equates quantity demanded with quantity supplied. Next is equilibrium quantity. The quantity supplied and the quantity demanded at the equilibrium price. On a graph, it is the quantity at which the supply and demand curve intersects. So where both curves intersect, and here the quantity is 15 units. And from the table, you can see that quantity demanded and quantity supplied becomes equal, that is 15 here, and the price level is here $3. So this shows the equilibrium quantity, that at $3 quantity demanded becomes equal to quantity supplied. So this is the equilibrium quantity where demand is equal to the supply, and here the price is $3.